My obsessive college bully became my landlord. Rain hammered against the taxi windows hard enough to blur the entire campus into streaks of grey and gold light. Eleanor Hart pressed her forehead against the cold glass anyway. Anything was better than staring at the driver checking her in the rearview mirror every 30 seconds, like he regretted accepting the ride. "You sure this is the place?" he asked again. Eleanor glanced at the massive building rising beyond the iron gates. Blackthorn residence looked less like student housing and more like the kind of place rich people locked family secrets inside. Dark stone walls, towering windows glowing amber against the storm, black iron balconies twisting upward like claws. A fountain stood dead in the center courtyard, rainwater overflowing the basin. It was beautiful, in an unsettling way. "That's the address," she murmured. The driver whistled softly. "Hell of a dorm." No kidding. Eleanor looked back down at her phone. Blackthorn residence, private student housing. Luxury student living, my arse. Nothing about this place felt normal. She swallowed hard as the cab rolled through the gates. This was supposed to be her fresh start. New city, new college, new life. No memories of high school, no whispers, no humiliation. No Damien Blackwood. The second the thought crossed her mind, her stomach twisted painfully. It had been 3 years since graduation, 3 years since she'd heard his voice, and somehow his name still made her chest tighten. Pathetic. The taxi stopped beneath the covered entrance. A sharply dressed doorman hurried forward with an umbrella before Eleanor could even reach her suitcase. "Miss Hart?" he asked politely. She blinked. Yes? We've been expecting you." We, not I. We. The words sent a strange ripple through her chest. The lobby doors opened before she even touched them. Warm light spilled across polished black marble floors. The entire lobby smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive cologne. A chandelier glittered overhead. Students moved through the space, laughing, carrying boxes, chatting with parents, but the building itself felt strangely quiet underneath the noise, like it was listening. Eleanor tightened her grip on her suitcase handle. This place had to be some kind of tax write-off for billionaires. There was no way college students could afford this. At the far end of the lobby hall stood a massive reception desk carved from black wood, and behind it, her entire body went cold. No way! The man standing beside the receptionist looked up slowly. 6'3", dark suit, broad shoulders, black hair pushed carelessly away from her forehead, and eyes, those same terrifying grey eyes she used to see watching her across classrooms. Damien Blackwood. The air vanished from her lungs. He didn't look surprised. That was the worst part. He looked like he'd been waiting. The receptionist was speaking to him, but Eleanor couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears. Her body reacted before her brain did. Panic, pure instinct. She turned sharply toward the exit. "Miss Hart." His voice stopped her instantly. Low, calm, controlled, just like it used to be. Every muscle in her body locked. Slowly, Eleanor turned around. Damien was already walking towards her. God, somehow he looked even worse now. Not worse in appearance, worse for her sanity. Because high school Damien was cruel in a reckless teenage way. This Damien, this version, looked composed enough to ruin lives quietly. The lobby suddenly felt too warm, too small. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of expensive cologne and rain, close enough that her stupid heartbeat started stumbling over itself. "Elena," he said softly. Nobody should sound that smooth saying her name. Her throat tightened. "What are you doing here?" One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not a smile, something more dangerous. "I could ask you the same thing." She stared at him in disbelief. "You work here." Several nearby students glanced over, not subtly. Of course they were looking. Damien Blackwood had always attracted attention like gravity. He slipped one hand into his pocket casually. "I own it." Silence. Rain crashed outside the windows. Eleanor actually laughed once because there was no way she heard that correctly. "What?" "The residence," he clarified. "I own the building." Her stomach dropped. No way. This had to be some sick coincidence. "Why would you own a student residence?" His gaze stayed fixed on her face. Too fixed, like he was cataloguing every reaction. "It was an investment." Lie.
She didn't know how she knew it was a lie, but she knew because Damien had always looked at her like this right before destroying her day. Slowly, carefully, like he enjoyed the anticipation more than the actual damage. "You transferred to Ravenshire?" asked she quietly. "No." His voice remained calm. "I've always been here." A cold feeling crept down her spine. 3 years? He'd been here for 3 years? The receptionist hurried over, holding a tablet. "Miss Hart, I just need your fingerprint registration for building access." She barely looked at her. Her hands stayed locked on Damien. "This is insane." The receptionist glanced nervously between them. Damien didn't even blink. "Your room is on the 7th floor, East Wing, corner suite." "How do you know my room?" His expression remained unreadable. "I approved every resident personally." Her pulse skipped. "What?" "You're a tenant of mine now, Elena." His gaze drifted slowly over her face. "Of course I know where you live." A horrible flutter twisted low in her stomach. Fear. That was fear. But why did it feel so dangerously close to something else? Eleanor grabbed the tablet from the receptionist harder than necessary. Her hands shook when pressing her thumb against the scanner. Damien noticed. Of course he noticed. "You still do that," he murmured. She frowned. "Do what?" "Shake when you're overwhelmed." Heat crawled up her neck instantly. God, he remembered that? "You don't know anything about me anymore." His eyes darkened slightly. "That's where you're wrong." The words hit far too intimately. The elevator doors opened behind them with a soft chime. Eleanor immediately grabbed her suitcase. "I'll be requesting a transfer tomorrow." Damien nodded once. "Good luck with that." Something about the way he said it made her stomach tighten again, like he already knew the outcome. She moved toward the elevator quickly, anything to get away from him. But right before the doors closed, Damien stepped forward slightly. "Elena." She looked up despite herself. Rain light flickered across his sharp features, and for one horrifying second he looked genuinely pleased to see her. "Welcome home."
Elena barely slept. Every sound inside Blackthorn residence felt wrong. The low hum of the vents, elevators moving at 3 in the morning, footsteps somewhere above her ceiling. Even the rain tapping against the massive windows sounded deliberate, like the building itself was awake. She lay staring at the dark ceiling until sunrise painted silver light across her room. Suite, not dorm. Definitely not dorm. The place was bigger than her old apartment. Dark hardwood floors, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking campus, a kitchen she would never use because she survived almost entirely on instant noodles and caffeine, and a bedroom door with a biometric lock. That part especially bothered her. No keys, no manual lock, only fingerprint access, controlled by the building system, controlled by him. Elena sat up slowly, rubbing exhaustion from her eyes. This wasn't happening. There was absolutely no way Damien Blackwood had orchestrated this. Yes, he was rich. Yes, he was insane. But buying an entire residence building over some high school obsession? That crossed into actual psychopath territory. She grabbed her phone. No transfer approval yet. Her housing request still read, "Pending review." Of course it did. Elena groaned and rolled out of bed. By the time she showered and dressed, her nerves had settled enough to feel embarrassed about yesterday. Maybe Damien really had changed. Maybe he wasn't obsessed. Maybe he was just... A soft beep interrupted her thoughts. Her apartment screen lit up near the front door. "Welcome, Miss Hart." Package delivery arrived. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't ordered anything. Cautiously, Elena opened the door. A black box sat perfectly centered outside her suite. No delivery person, no sound, just the package. She picked it up slowly. Inside was a new student ID badge, not unusual, except attached to it was a handwritten note. "Thought you'd lose the temporary one within a week. You always did. D." Elena stared at the note. Her heartbeat started climbing. He remembered that too? In high school, she constantly lost things, pens, ID cards, homework, and Damien used to mock her relentlessly for it. Except this didn't feel like mockery. It felt like observation, like he'd been paying attention far more than she realized. A sharp knock startled her. Elena nearly dropped the box. When she opened the door again, a blonde girl stood there smiling brightly.
"Hi, you're the new girl, right?" Elena exhaled shakily. "Yeah, I'm Sophie, Suite 706. She held up a coffee tray. "Peace offering. You looked like you were about to pass out yesterday." Elena relaxed slightly. Finally, a normal person. "That's actually the nicest thing anyone's done for me this week." Sophie grinned nervously. "Trust me, surviving Blackthorn requires caffeine." Elena took the coffee carefully. "What's that supposed to mean?" The girl lowered her voice dramatically. "This place has weird rules." "Of course it does." Elena leaned against the doorframe. "Like what?" "Well," Sophie glanced down the hallway first. "The owner is kind of intense." There it was again, that weird, tight feeling in Elena's stomach. "What do you mean, intense?" "She's just," Sophie struggled for the right word, "involved." Elena almost laughed. That was one way to describe Damien Blackwood. "Like he actually monitors the building?" "Oh, absolutely." Sophie pointed upwards. "There are cameras everywhere." Elena looked instinctively toward the hallway corners. Tiny black security cameras stared back silently. A chill slid down Elena's spine. "He says it's for safety," Sophie continued, "but maintenance shows up before people even report problems. Last month my sink leaked, and they knocked on my door 10 minutes later." 10 minutes. Elena's grip tightened slightly on the coffee tray. "That's weird, right?" Sophie laughed nervously. "Also, he randomly appears out of nowhere sometimes." "Of course he does." "He lives here?" "Penthouse level." Elena frowned. "There's a penthouse?" Sophie's expression shifted immediately, like she'd already said too much. "Technically, no." Before Elena could ask more, the elevator chimed softly. Both girls looked up automatically, and there he was. Damien stepped into the hallway, wearing a charcoal coat over a black button-down shirt. His gaze landed on Elena instantly. Not searching, not surprised, directly on her, like it naturally belonged there. The hallway suddenly felt much smaller. Sophie straightened awkwardly. "Morning, Mr. Blackwood." "Good morning, Sophie." His voice was smooth enough to melt through concrete. Then his attention returned to Elena. "You received your replacement ID." "Not a question." Elena crossed her arms immediately. "You could have just emailed me." "I could have." "Then why didn't you?" His eyes moved slowly over her face. "I preferred this." Butterflies erupted low in her stomach violently. It irritated her. God, she hated how calm he was, like every interaction had already been rehearsed in his head. Sophie glanced between them with growing interest. "Oh my God," she whispered, "you two know each other?" "Unfortunately," Elena muttered. Damien ignored that completely. "You haven't eaten." Elena blinked. "What?" His gaze flicked toward the tray. "The coffee is your breakfast." Again. Heat crept across her face. How did he still know that? "You don't get to comment on my eating habits." And yet I just did. Sophie looked seconds away from combusting from curiosity. Elena stepped fully into the hallway. "What exactly is your problem?" Damien tilted his head slightly. "You came into my building looking terrified yesterday." "Your building?" "It is mine." Something dark flickered behind his eyes. "And you're under my protection while you live here." Elena actually laughed this time. "Protection? From who?" His gaze sharpened slightly. "Anyone." The word landed heavily between them. Possessive, certain, dangerous. Sophie suddenly looked very interested in her coffee. Elena folded her arms tighter. "You don't own me, Damien." His eyes lowered briefly, not to her face, to the biometric scanner beside her door, then back up again. "No," he agreed quietly, "but I do own every lock in this building." Silence. A pulse skipped hard in Elena's throat. That shouldn't have sounded intimate, or threatening, or even weirdly thrilling, but somehow it sounded all three. Damien stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell cedarwood and rain again. Close enough that her body instantly went rigid. "You should avoid the west stairwell after midnight." Her brows furrowed. "Why?" "Camera blind spots." The blood drained from her face.
He noticed. A faint smile touched his mouth. "There's the expression I remember. You're insane." "Probably." He said it so casually it made her chest tighten. Then his gaze shifted suddenly to her neck, to the small silver necklace resting against her skin. His expression changed almost imperceptibly, darker, focused. Before Elena realized what he was doing, Damien reached forward. Her breath caught instantly. His fingers brushed lightly against her throat as he adjusted the crooked chain. The touch lasted maybe 2 seconds. Still, every nerve ending in her body exploded awake. "There," he murmured softly. Elena forgot how to breathe. His fingers withdrew slowly, too slowly. "You still shake when you're nervous." Her pulse stumbled violently. Sophie looked like she was witnessing a crime. Damien stepped back smoothly. "Orientation starts in 20 minutes. Elena stared at him. "How do you know my schedule?" That dangerous, almost smile returned. "I know everything that happens inside Blackthorn residence." Then he walked away, just walked calmly toward the elevator, like he hadn't completely destroyed the oxygen in the hallway. The elevator doors closed behind him. Silence. Sophie turned slowly towards Elena. "What the hell was that?"
The rest of Thursday passed in a blur of lectures, awkward introductions, and Elena trying very hard not to think about Damien Blackwood, which was impossible, because everywhere she went inside Blackthorn residence, she felt him, not physically, psychologically. The cameras in the hallways, the silent elevators, the fingerprint locks clicking behind her. Even the students acted strangely around him, too careful, too aware, like everyone understood Blackthorn belonged to Damien in a way that went far beyond paperwork. By Friday evening, Elena was exhausted. She had just stepped out of the elevator onto the 7th floor when music slammed into her ears. Heavy bass, laughter, shouting. Her brows furrowed. The hallway near Suite 718 was packed with students. Someone had thrown open the double doors and flashing red lights spilled across the corridor. "A party," Elena muttered. Sophie suddenly appeared beside her, carrying 2 plastic cups. "There you are," Sophie shouted over the music. Elena startled slightly. "Jesus," Sophie laughed. "Come on, you've been hiding in your room for 2 days." "I have classes." "You also have trauma eyes." Elena narrowed her gaze. "Trauma eyes? You look like you're constantly expecting a sniper attack." "Honestly, fair." Sophie grabbed Elena's wrist before she could refuse. "Tonight, you're acting like a normal college student." 20 minutes later, Elena deeply regretted every decision that led her into Suite 718. The place was chaos, bodies everywhere, music shaking the walls, liquor bottles lined across the kitchen island, people dancing in dim red lighting. Elena leaned against the counter, clutching a soda, while Sophie disappeared into the crowd. She already wanted to leave. The problem was, for the first time since arriving at Ravenshire, nobody here knew her. Nobody knew about high school. Nobody looked at her with pity. Nobody whispered. For a brief moment, Elena almost felt normal. Then, a voice beside her ruined it. "Well, you definitely don't look boring." Elena turned. A tall, brown-haired guy leaned against the counter, smiling at her. Definitely attractive. Definitely drunk. "Elijah," he introduced himself. "Elena." "I know," Elijah said casually. Her stomach tightened immediately. "How?" "You're the mysterious girl living on Damien Blackwood's floor." "Oh, of course." She forced a smile. "That sounds dramatic." "It is dramatic," Elijah laughed. "Nobody gets personal attention from Blackwood." Elena took a sip of soda. "Lucky me." His eyes drifted over her face. "You don't seem excited about it." "Because Damien Blackwood spent most of high school psychologically tormenting her. But sure." "Not really," Elena answered. Elijah moved slightly closer. "Then maybe you should stop hiding in that creepy building owner's shadow." Before Elena could respond, the music abruptly cut off. The entire room groaned. "What the hell? Seriously?" Then silence fell. Not normal silence. Tense silence. Students near the doorway straightened immediately, and Elena already knew why before she even turned around. Damien stood in the entrance. Black coat, black gloves, Rain still clinging to his shoulders. The room shifted around him instantly, like gravity had entered. Every conversation lowered, every movement slowed. His grey eyes scanned the crowded suite once, then landed directly on Elena. Her pulse betrayed her immediately. Beside her, Elijah muttered quietly, "Well, shit." Damien walked into the room calmly, not angry. That somehow made him worse. A blonde guy near the speakers laughed nervously. "Relax, Blackwood. We were just—" "The noise complaint came from 3 floors down," Damien interrupted smoothly. The room went dead silent. He removed one glove slowly. "Elijah," Damien said, without taking his eyes off Elena, "why are you touching my tenant?" Elena looked down. At some point during the conversation, Elijah's hand had settled lightly against her lower back. She stepped away immediately. I asked him," Damien said calmly. Every hair on Elena's arm stood up. Elijah straightened. "We were talking." Damien nodded once. "Then talk." The tension in the room became suffocating. Elijah swallowed hard. "Look, man, it's not— You're drunk, your hand placement is sloppy, your pupils are dilated, and you ignored the fact that she stepped away twice." Elena's breath caught. He noticed that? Damien's gaze finally shifted to Elijah fully, and now she's uncomfortable. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. The terrifying part wasn't Damien's words, it was how controlled he sounded saying them. Elijah lifted his hands slightly. "All right, fine." Damien held his stare for another long second before looking towards the speakers. "Party's over." A chorus of complaints erupted immediately. "Come on, it's barely 11. Damien didn't even raise his voice. "Now." Everyone started moving instantly. Elena stared at him in disbelief. The power he carried inside this building was insane. Within minutes, students poured into the hallway, grumbling under their breath. Sophie appeared, looking stressed. "Sorry," she whispered to Elena. "He always does this. Always. Like this was normal behavior." Elena grabbed her jacket. "I'm leaving." Probably smart, because Damien's attention hadn't left her once. Not once. The hallway outside buzzed with annoyed students waiting for elevators. Elena headed towards the stairwell instead. She needed air, needed distance. The heavy door slammed shut behind her, muting the noise instantly. Silence. Cool concrete air wrapped around her skin. She exhaled shakily and started descending the stairs. Halfway down the landing, a voice spoke behind her. "You shouldn't go into isolated stairwells alone." Elena froze. Of course he followed her. She turned slowly. Damien stood at the top of the stairs watching her. His expression remained unreadable. "Elijah wasn't hurting me," Elena said defensively. Damien descended one step at a time. "No," he agreed quietly, "but he wanted to." "That doesn't justify whatever that was." "You mean protecting you?" "I mean acting insane." Damien stopped 2 steps above her, still taller, still overwhelming. "You attract attention from dangerous men." Elena laughed once in disbelief. "You cannot possibly lack that much self-awareness." Something dark flickered behind his eyes. Interesting. She hit a nerve. Rain battered faintly against the small stairwell windows. The silence stretched. Then Damien spoke again. "Did he touch you after you moved away?" Elena frowned slightly. "What?" "Damien," the voice remained calm, "did he continue touching you after you pulled away?" "No." Then he understood the warning. Warning, not threat. That distinction somehow made it scarier. Elena folded her arms. "You don't get to act possessive over me." Damien's gaze dropped briefly to her mouth, then back to her eyes. Possessive? The way he repeated the word made heat creep into her face. God, she should not be reacting like this. "You know exactly what I mean." He descended another step slowly. Now there was barely any space between them. Elena's heartbeat stumbled hard. "You think I'm possessive now?" Damien asked softly. Butterflies erupted violently in her stomach. Not butterflies. Anxiety, definitely anxiety. Probably. "You bullied me for years," Elena whispered. "You don't suddenly get to play protective." Something shifted in his expression then. Not anger, something heavier, more complicated. "You still think that's what it was?" Her breath caught. "What is that supposed to mean?"
Damien stared at her for a long moment, then his hand lifted slowly. Elena went completely still when his fingers brushed a strand of hair away from her face. The touch was impossibly gentle, which somehow felt more dangerous than aggression. "You were always terrible at noticing things," Damien murmured. His thumb barely grazed her cheek. Electricity shot through her chest instantly. Then a loud stairwell door slammed open below them. Both of them stepped apart immediately. A group of laughing students stumbled upward without noticing the tension. Elena's pulse hammered violently. Damien looked completely unaffected. Of course he did. He stepped back fully. "You should get some sleep, Elena." Her voice came out shakily. "Stop acting like you care about me." His grey eyes locked onto Elena's. "That's the problem," Damien said quietly. "I never stopped."
Next morning, Elena woke up before her alarm. Not because she was rested, because something felt wrong. That same feeling again, like she was being observed even in silence. She sat up slowly in bed and looked around her room. Nothing. Just clean walls, soft morning light, and the faint hum of the building system. Still, her eyes drifted instinctively toward the ceiling. Camera. Of course there was a camera. She exhaled sharply and got up. "Get a grip," Elena muttered to herself, but the words didn't help. She spent the morning trying to feel normal. Classes, coffee, notebook scribbles she didn't remember writing. By noon, she was already exhausted again. That's when the maintenance notification appeared on her apartment screen. Bathroom fix scheduled, 12:30 p.m. Elena frowned. She hadn't reported anything. She opened the message and typed quickly, "Elena Hart, I didn't request maintenance." The reply came instantly. "Blackthorn Residence Admin, issue pre-identified. Access will be granted automatically." She stared at the screen. Pre-identified? How? Her shower had been slightly dripping for one day. That's it. Still, she stepped out of her apartment an hour later to grab food. When she returned, the bathroom faucet had already been replaced. Clean. Perfect. No mess. No trace anyone had even been there. Elena stood frozen in her doorway. "That's impossible," she whispered. Later that evening, Elena decided she needed air, real air, not the controlled, filtered, expensive kind that seemed to circulate inside Blackthorn. She walked down the hallway toward the elevators. That's when she noticed something, a small black dome in the corner ceiling. Camera. Then another near the stairwell, then another above the elevator panel. Her steps slowed. "Elena," she muttered under her breath, "stop looking." But she couldn't stop. Every 10 steps revealed another angle, another eye. The building wasn't just monitored, it was watched from everywhere. When she reached the ground floor lobby, Sophie was sitting on one of the lounge chairs scrolling through her phone. Sophie looked up immediately. "Hey," Sophie said brightly, "you look like you've seen a ghost." Elena dropped into the chair beside her. "I think I'm being paranoid," Elena admitted. Sophie tilted her head. "About what?" Elena hesitated, then lowered her voice. "The cameras." Sophie didn't even look surprised. That alone made Elena's stomach drop. Sophie shrugged lightly. "Oh, that." Elena turned sharply. "You knew?" Sophie sighed like this was normal conversation. "Elena, this building is basically under surveillance 24/7. Elena frowned. "That's not normal." "It's Blackthorn," Sophie said simply. Elena stared at her. "That's not an explanation." Sophie leaned in slightly. "Look," Sophie said quietly, "no one gets harassed here. No break-ins, no random strangers wandering in. It's safe." "That's not safety," Elena replied. "That's control." Sophie hesitated. That pause told Elena everything. A soft voice cut through the lobby. "Elena Hart." Both girls froze. Elena already knew that voice. She turned slowly. Damien stood near the reception desk. Dark shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled slightly. Calm as always, but his eyes were on her like they never left her alone.
Sophie immediately stood up. "I'll leave you too." She disappeared fast. Of course she did. Elena stood reluctantly. "What is it now?" she asked. Damien's gaze flicked briefly to the cameras above them, then back to her. "You didn't respond to your maintenance confirmation." Elena blinked. "That's what you came to tell me?" "I came to check," Damien corrected. Something in her chest tightened, annoyingly. "You don't need to check on me," Elena said firmly. Damien tilted his head slightly. "I disagree." A beat. Silence. Elena crossed her arms. "You're not my guardian." "No, I'm your landlord. That's worse." That made something almost like amusement flicker in his eyes. "You're adjusting well. To what?" "To my building." Elena stepped closer without thinking. "Why are there cameras everywhere?" The air shifted instantly. Not tense, sharper. Damien's expression didn't change, but his focus deepened. "For safety," he said simply. Elena let out a short laugh. "That's not an answer." "It is. It's an excuse." Their eyes locked. The lobby noise faded around them. Damien spoke more quietly now. "You don't understand how careless people are. I understand I didn't ask to be watched." His gaze didn't move. "I don't watch you." The words landed wrong, too fast, too precise. Elena narrowed her eyes. That sounded rehearsed. A pause, just a fraction too long. Then, "I manage security systems." Elena studied him. Something in her gut twisted, because he wasn't denying it strongly enough. A few seconds later, a group of students passed behind them laughing loudly. The moment broke slightly. Elena exhaled. "I want access to disable cameras in my room," she said suddenly. Damien looked at her, completely still. "No," he said. One word, clean, final. Elena frowned. "Excuse me? You're safer with them on. That's not your decision." His voice stayed calm. "It is, inside this building." Silence. Elena felt heat rise in her chest. Anger, confusion, something worse underneath it. "You're insane." Damien didn't react. Instead, he stepped slightly closer. Not threatening, not aggressive, just closer. "You left your curtains open last night," he said quietly. Elena froze. Her stomach dropped instantly. "What?" His gaze didn't waver. "The east window. You forgot to close it." Elena's breath turned shallow. "That's impossible," she whispered. Damien's voice stayed steady. "It isn't." A pause, then, "I noticed." Elena stepped back immediately. Her heart was suddenly too loud, too fast. "You're not supposed to notice that." Damien watched her reaction carefully, like he always did. "You're not supposed to leave them open." Something in her chest twisted violently. Elena shook her head slightly. "This is not normal." Damien's expression softened just a fraction, almost imperceptible. "Normal doesn't keep you safe." And for the first time, Elena didn't know whether to believe him or fear him more.
That night, Eleanor didn't close her curtains, not because she forgot, because she couldn't stop thinking about what Damien said. "You left your curtains open last night." That sentence kept replaying in her mind like a scratched record. She sat on her bed with her laptop open, but nothing on the screen made sense. Her thoughts kept drifting back to him. Damien Blackwood, still the same name that used to make her feel small in school, except now it didn't feel like just fear. It felt complicated, annoying, confusing. Eleanor shut the laptop harder than necessary. "Stop," she whispered to herself. But the building had other plans. A sudden flicker of lights. Then, everything went dark. Eleanor froze. Silence swallowed the entire room. No hum, no air system, no light, just the storm outside pressing against the glass. She stood up quickly. "Great," Eleanor muttered. "Power cut." Her phone's flashlight clicked on immediately. The hallway outside her room was dim red emergency lighting now.
The building felt different without electricity, stripped, exposed. Eleanor stepped out cautiously. "Hello?" she called. Her voice echoed strangely. No response. She started walking toward the elevators. Dead, of course. She sighed. Stairs it is. A few floors down, the stairwell door creaked open slowly. Eleanor stepped inside. Cold air hit her instantly. Too quiet, too isolated. She hesitated halfway down the stairs. Then, a voice spoke behind her. "You shouldn't be here alone." Eleanor spun around. Damien stood at the top of the stairwell, like he had always been there. Of course he had. Eleanor sighed sharply. "Do you just appear whenever I'm mildly inconvenienced?" Damien started descending the stairs slowly. Power outage triggered emergency systems. Elevators are locked. Security is rerouting residents. Eleanor crossed her arms. "So you came to supervise?" "I came because you didn't return to your room." That made her pause. Her tone softened slightly without permission. "I was going back." Damien stopped one step above her. Close, too close again. The red emergency light cut sharp lines across his face. "You're not supposed to be wandering alone during a blackout," he said. Eleanor frowned. "I'm not a child." "I didn't say you were." The silence stretched. Something in the air shifted. Outside, thunder rolled faintly. Eleanor shifted her weight. "I'm fine," she said quietly. Damien studied her for a moment. Then, "You're not," he said simply. That should have annoyed her. Instead, it made her chest tighten. Eleanor looked away first. "That's not your problem," she whispered. Damien didn't respond immediately. Then he stepped down one more stair. Now they were almost level, almost equal, but not really, because he still looked like he controlled the entire world she was standing in. "Eleanor," Damien said softly. Hearing her name like that again did something dangerous to her focus. She looked up. His gaze held hers. Not cold, not mocking, just steady. "The lights used to go out in school during storms." Eleanor froze. That memory surfaced instantly. Old classroom, sudden blackout, students laughing nervously, her frozen in place, unable to move, and a boy standing nearby, not laughing, just watching her. Eleanor's breath caught. "That was you?" she whispered. Damien didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, "Yes." Her chest tightened. "You scared me," she said automatically. "I know." The honesty hit harder than expected. Eleanor looked at him fully now. "What did I ever do to you?" she asked softly. That question hung between them. Damien's expression shifted slightly. Something behind his eyes tightened. "You were the only thing I couldn't control," he said quietly. The words landed heavily in the stairwell. Eleanor didn't move, didn't breathe properly. "That doesn't make sense," she whispered. "It does," he replied. A beat, then softer. "You always ran away from me." Eleanor swallowed hard. "I wasn't running away." Damien looked at her. "You were." Silence. Rain pressed harder against the windows outside. The building groaned slightly as backup generators started waking up. Faint lights flickered in the hallway above. Still, neither of them moved. Eleanor finally spoke again. "You bullied me," she said quietly. Damien didn't deny it. He never did. Instead, he said, "I noticed you more than anyone else." That shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Eleanor's grip tightened on the edge of his jacket. "I don't know what that means," she whispered. Damien stepped slightly closer again, not enough to trap her, but enough that she felt his presence like gravity. "You, Eleanor," Damien said softly. The lights in the stairwell suddenly flickered back on, bright white, too sharp after darkness. Eleanor blinked. When she looked back, Damien was already stepping away, putting distance back between them like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just turned her entire world upside down in a stairwell. He adjusted his sleeves calmly. "Power's back," he said. Eleanor still stood there, Damien's jacket hanging off her shoulders. She stared at him, heart still racing. "You didn't answer my question." Damien paused at the top of the stairs. Without turning fully back, he said, "I did," and then he walked away.
The next morning, Elena woke up with Damien's jacket still on her chair. She didn't remember taking it off. Or maybe she had. She just didn't remember doing it consciously. That annoyed her more than it should have. She stared at it for a long moment. Dark fabric, clean scent, too familiar now. Elena grabbed it suddenly. "I'm returning this," she muttered. She made her way down to the lobby around 9:15 a.m. The building was calmer in the morning, less chaotic, almost elegant again. Students passed by with coffee and laptops. Everything looked normal, except nothing felt normal anymore. Elena stepped into the lobby and immediately stopped. Damien was there. Of course he was there, standing near the reception desk, speaking to an assistant with a tablet. Sharp suit, calm posture, like he owned time itself, which Elena was starting to suspect he might. She walked straight toward him without thinking. "Damien," Elena called. He turned immediately, always immediately. His attention never lagged when it came to her. "Yes," Damien said calmly. Elena held out the jacket. "You left this on me." Damien looked at it, then back at her. "I didn't leave it," he corrected. Elena frowned. "You put it on me." "Yes." A pause. "That still counts as leaving it," Elena said. Damien's expression remained neutral. "If you prefer semantics." Elena exhaled sharply. "You can take it back." Damien didn't move to take it immediately. Instead, his eyes scanned her face, too slowly, too focused. "You slept." Elena blinked. "What?" "You slept better," he clarified. That made her pause. "How would you know that?" Damien didn't answer right away. Then simply, "You weren't restless at 3 a.m. A cold feeling crept up Elena's spine. "You checked." His expression didn't change. "I noticed." There it was again, that word. Not watched, not monitored, noticed. Elena swallowed. "You don't get to notice me like that," she said quietly. Damien finally reached out and took the jacket from her hands. His fingers brushed hers for half a second. Electric, intentional, or not. Hard to tell anymore. "You're part of my building," Damien said calmly. Elena narrowed her eyes. "That doesn't explain anything." "It explains enough." A pause. Then Elena asked more sharply, "Why did my transfer request get denied?" That finally changed something in his expression. Not guilt, not surprise, just acknowledgement. "It wasn't suitable," Damien said. Elena stared at him. "You rejected it." "Yes." Elena let out a short laugh. "On what authority?" Damien's gaze held hers. "Mine." The word landed heavy, final. Elena felt her chest tighten. "This is insane," she whispered. Damien stepped slightly closer now. Not invading, just closing space. "You came here to study," Damien said calmly. "I came here for freedom." A beat. Damien studied her face carefully, then said, "You are free." Elena laughed again, sharper this time. "You're joking." "I'm not restricting your movement." Elena gestured around them. "This entire building is controlled by you. That is for safety. You keep saying that like it fixes everything." Damien didn't respond immediately. Then he said quietly, "You don't understand what I'm preventing." That made Elena pause. "What does that mean?" Damien's eyes darkened slightly, a fraction, barely noticeable, but enough. "It means," he said slowly, "that this is the safest place you can be." Elena shook her head. "That's not your decision." Damien didn't argue. Instead, he stepped even closer now, close enough that the lobby noise faded again. Only him, only her. "Elena," Damien said softly. Hearing her name like that again made her stomach flip annoyingly. "You will try to leave again," he said. Elena frowned. "I will." Damien nodded once. "I know." That calm acceptance unsettled her more than resistance. Elena stepped back slightly. "Why are you like this?" she asked quietly. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Something older. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said,
You don't remember most of what happened in school. Elena stiffened. That's not true. Damien tilted his head slightly. You remember what you want to. Her breath caught slightly. That's not fair. Damien's voice softened. Neither was it. Silence stretched between them. A student passed behind them, laughing into a phone, completely unaware of the tension that filled the lobby. Elena finally spoke again. You can't control me. Damien's gaze didn't move. I'm not trying to control you. The lie should have been obvious, but something about how calm he sounded made it harder to dismiss. Elena frowned. Then what are you doing? A long pause. Damien looked at her for a moment that felt too deep, then quietly said, I'm keeping you here. That wasn't an answer that helped at all. Elena's voice lowered. Against my will. Another pause. Then Damien said softer, if necessary. The words should have terrified her, and part of her did feel that, but another part, a dangerous, confusing part, just stood there staring at him, trying to understand why it didn't feel like a simple threat anymore. Damien stepped back first this time, always controlled, always measured. You should attend your afternoon classes, he said calmly. Elena blinked. Are you dismissing me? I'm advising you. Elena watched him carefully. And if I ignore your advice? A faint pause. Then Damien said, You rarely do. And then he turned and walked away, leaving Elena standing in the middle of the lobby, holding nothing except too many unanswered questions.
Later that afternoon, Elena tried very hard to not think about Damien Blackwood. It lasted exactly 17 minutes, which honestly felt like a personal record. She sat outside the campus cafe with a notebook open in front of her, pretending to study. Pretending was important, because actually studying required focus, and focus required not replaying Damien's voice in her head every 5 seconds. I'm keeping you here. Elena exhaled sharply. Nope, she muttered to herself, not thinking about that. A shadow fell across her table. Elena looked up. A guy stood there holding 2 drinks. Brown hair, easy smile, casual confidence. Hey, he said, mind if I sit? Elena hesitated, then nodded politely. Sure. He sat across from her. I'm Noah, he said, sliding one drink toward her. Elena blinked. I didn't order this. Noah smiled. I did. That should have been her first red flag, but he looked harmless enough. I saw you in Blackthorn Residence, 7th floor, right? Elena's stomach tightened slightly. Yeah, she said carefully. Noah leaned back in his chair. People say that floor is interesting. Elena frowned. Interesting how? He shrugged. Let's just say the owner doesn't usually take personal interest in tenants. Elena's grip tightened slightly around her pen. I don't know what you've heard, but it's not like that. Noah studied her, then smiled slightly. You're either very naive or very protected. Elena didn't like either option. Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the noise behind her. Elena. Her body reacted instantly. Too fast, too familiar. She turned. Damien stood at the edge of the cafe seating area. Black shirt, no coat, sleeves rolled. Calm expression, but his eyes weren't calm. This time, they were locked on Noah. Elena's stomach dropped. Oh no, she whispered under her breath. Noah looked over his shoulder. Do you know him? Noah asked casually. Elena didn't get a chance to answer. Damien walked over, slow, measured, like he had all the time in the world, which meant Noah suddenly looked like he had none. Damien stopped beside their table. Elena, Damien said again, softer this time. Stand up. Elena blinked. What? Stand up, he repeated. It wasn't loud, but it was final. Elena hesitated, then stood. Noah looked between them. Everything okay? Noah asked. Damien didn't look at Noah immediately. Instead, he looked at the drink in front of Elena, then at Noah, then said quietly, Did you give her that? Noah raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I was just being friendly. That was the wrong answer. Elena felt it immediately. The air shifted. Damien finally turned his full attention to Noah. You don't know her, Damien said calmly. Noah shrugged. I was trying to. A pause. Then Damien said, Stop. Just one word. Noah blinked. Excuse me? Damien's gaze didn't move. Stop trying. Silence dropped like a weight.
Elena's heart rate spiked instantly. "Damien," Elena said quickly, "it's just coffee." He didn't look at her. "Not now," he said quietly. That alone made her go silent. Noah laughed awkwardly. "Dude, she can speak for herself." That was it. Something in Damien's expression changed. Not anger, something colder, sharper. "I'm aware," Damien said. Then he stepped closer to Noah's table. Not aggressive, not loud, just enough. "You're new here," Damien continued calmly, "so I'll explain this once." Noah frowned. "Explain what?" Damien tilted his head slightly. "You misunderstand proximity here." Elena felt her stomach tighten. Noah scoffed. "What does that even mean?" Damien's eyes flicked briefly towards Elena, then back to Noah, then said quietly, "It means," Damien said softly, "you don't approach what belongs to me." The words hit like a slap. Elena froze. Noah blinked. "What?" he said. Damien didn't repeat it. He didn't need to. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the cafe noise around them. Elena stepped forward quickly. "Damien," Elena said firmly, "I am not." He finally looked at her, and something about his expression stopped her mid-sentence. Not anger, not jealousy, something controlled, almost too controlled. "Finish your class schedule," Damien said quietly. "I'll walk you back." Elena stared at him. "That's not necessary." "It is." Noah stood up slowly, awkwardly. "Okay, I think I'm going to." Damien didn't look at him, but he said, "You should." Noah left immediately, didn't even finish his drink, just walked away. Elena watched him go, then turned sharply towards Damien. "You scared him," she said. Damien looked at her. "He was trying to access you." Elena frowned. "He was talking to me." Damien stepped closer again. His voice dropped. "You don't see intent quickly enough." Elena shook her head. "This is insane." Damien didn't deny it. Instead, he said quietly, "You attract attention." Elena crossed her arms. "So do you." That made him pause, just briefly. Then, "Not the kind I allow near you." The sentence landed too softly, too dangerously. Elena stared at him. "You don't get to decide that," she whispered. Damien's gaze held hers. A long moment passed. Then he said, "I already did." And for the first time, Elena wasn't sure if she was supposed to feel protected or trapped.
That night, Helena didn't go back to the cafe. She didn't go anywhere near Damien either. Instead, she locked herself inside her room and sat on the edge of her bed staring at the wall. Her mind wouldn't settle. "You don't approach what belongs to me." That line kept repeating, not like a memory, like a warning that refused to fade. Elena pressed her palms against her face. "This is getting worse," she whispered. Outside, Blackthorn residence was unusually quiet. Too quiet. No distant laughter, no footsteps in the hallway. Even the elevators felt still, like the entire building was holding its breath. Later that night, Elena couldn't sleep. At around 1:40 a.m. she got up. "I need water," she muttered, like that explained everything. It didn't. She stepped into the hallway. Dim emergency lights lit the corridor in soft blue. Everything looked different at night, stripped down, more honest. She walked toward the elevator. Halfway there, she noticed something unusual. A door she hadn't seen before. It was at the far end of the hallway, black, thicker than the others, no number plate, just a small red panel beside it. Access restricted. Elena frowned. "That's new," she whispered. She stepped closer. The panel blinked faintly. Not broken, active. She glanced down the hallway. Empty. Her heart beat a little faster. This is probably nothing, she told herself, but her hand still reached out. Just a look, just to see. Her finger hovered over the panel. Then, a voice came from behind her. "Elena." She froze, slowly turned around. Damien stood near the elevator, still, calm, but his eyes were immediately on her hand, not her face, her hand. Elena pulled it back instantly. "I wasn't doing anything." Damien walked toward her slowly. "You were about to access a restricted floor," he said.
Elena frowned. There's a restricted floor? His expression didn't change. Yes. She gestured toward the door. Behind this? Damien stopped a few steps away. Correct. Elena narrowed her eyes. Why is it restricted? A pause. Too long. Damien said, infrastructure. That answer was too quick, too clean. Elena stepped closer to the door again. Damien's voice lowered slightly. Elena. That tone again. Warning disguised as calm. She stopped. They stood there for a moment in silence. Then Elena said quietly, "You're hiding something." Damien didn't deny it. That was worse. A faint hum came from the wall panel. Elena turned her head slightly. "Why is it locked so heavily?" she asked. Damien's gaze remained steady. "Because people shouldn't go there." "That's not an answer," she snapped. His eyes flickered slightly. "Not everything needs to be answered." Elena turned back to him fully. "Everything you do feels like a secret." Damien stepped closer, not enough to corner her, but enough that the air changed again. "You're curious," he said softly. Elena frowned. "That's not the same thing. It leads to the same place." Their eyes locked. Something in her chest tightened again. That frustrating pull. Fear. Curiosity. Something dangerously close to trust. Elena forced herself to look away first. "I want access," she said. Damien didn't respond immediately. Then, "No." Simple. Final. Elena let out a breath of disbelief. "You can't just say no to everything." "I can," he replied. That made her laugh bitterly. "You really enjoy control, don't you?" Silence. Then Damien said quietly, "I enjoy preventing consequences." Elena shook her head. "That sounds the same." "It isn't." She stepped back slightly. "This building doesn't feel like a dorm." Damien watched her carefully. "It is a dorm." "It feels like a system," she corrected. A pause. Then Damien said, "Most systems keep people safe." Elena looked at him sharply. "And who keeps people safe from the system?" That question lingered. Damien didn't answer. For the first time, he looked slightly distant. Not cold, not dominant, just distant. A soft mechanical sound echoed down the hallway. Elena turned instinctively. The restricted door panel flickered red, then green just for a second, then back to red. Her breath caught. "What was that?" she whispered. Damien stepped forward immediately, blocking her view slightly. "Nothing," he said, too fast. Elena looked up at him. "That wasn't nothing." His jaw tightened subtly. "Elena," he said quietly, "go back to your room." She didn't move. "Why?" Damien held her gaze, because for the first time since she met him, he looked like he was choosing his words carefully. "Because you don't understand what you're standing near," he said. Elena swallowed. "That sounds like a threat." "It isn't." But he didn't elaborate, and that silence said more than words ever could. Elena stepped back slowly. "Fine," she said quietly, "but I'm not done with this." Damien didn't respond, just watched her as she walked away. And for the first time, Elena noticed something different in his expression. Not control, not obsession, something closer to worry.
The next morning, Eleanor didn't go to her morning class. Not because she skipped it on purpose, because she genuinely couldn't focus on anything except the locked floor. And Damien's face when he stopped her, that slight hesitation, that almost worry, it didn't fit the version of him she was trying to understand, or the version she wanted to hate. By noon, she was sitting in the common lounge of Blackthorn residence, pretending to read. Her eyes kept drifting to the hallway entrance, waiting. She hated that she was waiting. Around 12:47 p.m., the elevator chimed. Eleanor didn't look up immediately. She already knew. Damien stepped into the lounge. He always moved like the building made space for him, like everything adjusted quietly around his presence. He stopped when he saw her. "Eleanor," Damien said. She didn't respond right away. Then, finally, "You lied to me last night." A pause. Damien didn't deny it. That alone made her chest tighten. He walked closer but didn't sit. "I didn't lie," he said calmly. Eleanor finally looked at him. "You said it was infrastructure." Damien held her gaze. "It is infrastructure. That doesn't explain why it's restricted." A beat of silence. Then Damien said, "Not everything you see needs access." Eleanor exhaled sharply. "That's not how secrets work." Something flickered in his eyes at the word secrets. Then he said quietly, "You shouldn't have gone near it." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "Or what?" Damien didn't answer immediately. That pause again, the one that always made her feel like she was standing too close to something she didn't understand. Then, "Or you would have seen something you can't unsee," he said. Eleanor stared at him. A chill ran through her. "Is that a threat?" she asked. "No," Damien said softly. "It's a warning." Silence. Eleanor closed her book slowly. "I don't understand you," she whispered. Damien's gaze softened slightly. "That's because you're still thinking in simple terms," he replied. Eleanor frowned. "What does that mean?" He finally sat down across from her. For the first time, not towering, just close. Human distance. Still dangerous, but different. Damien said, "People think people act in clear ways. Good, bad, harmless, dangerous." Eleanor didn't respond, because that sounded too familiar. Damien continued, "But people are rarely just one thing." Eleanor looked at him carefully. "Are you trying to justify yourself?" she asked quietly. A pause. Then Damien said, "I'm trying to explain you." That made her freeze. "What?" His eyes didn't move from hers. "You think I started noticing you in school because I disliked you." Eleanor's stomach tightened instantly. "That's what bullying is," she said. Damien didn't react. Instead, he said quietly, "That's not why." A long silence. The lounge around them felt suddenly distant, like they were separated from everything else. Eleanor's voice dropped. "Then why?" Damien looked at her for a long moment, then leaned back slightly. Not relaxed, controlled, always controlled. "I was the only person who didn't change how they acted around me," he said. Eleanor frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," he replied. A beat. Then he added, "You didn't fear me correctly." Eleanor blinked. "That's not a compliment. It isn't meant to be." Silence. Eleanor's heart felt oddly loud. "I was scared of you," she said quietly. Damien tilted his head slightly. "No," he said. "You reacted to me, but you didn't understand me." That sentence sat uncomfortably in her chest. Eleanor looked away. "You made my life miserable," she said again. Damien didn't deny it. Instead, softer. "I know." A pause. Then he added something quieter. "And I still watched you leave every day after school." Eleanor's breath caught. That shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Damien continued, voice steady but lower now. "You think I didn't notice your habits, the way you always took the longer route home, the way you checked over your shoulder twice before turning corners, the way you pretended not to notice me even when you did." Eleanor's fingers tightened around her book. "That's not normal," she whispered. "No," Damien agreed. A beat. Then he said it. "I was obsessed with how you existed." Eleanor froze completely. The word landed differently than everything before. Not control, not protection, not safety. Obsessed. Damien didn't look away, like he wasn't ashamed of saying it, just honest. Eleanor swallowed. "You're saying that like it's supposed to make sense," she said quietly. "It does," he replied. Another pause. Then he leaned forward slightly. "Eleanor," Damien said softly, "you were never random to me." Her heart stuttered. "Then what was I?" she asked. His eyes darkened slightly. "Disruption," he said. "Pattern break." Eleanor frowned. "That sounds insane." "It is," Damien admitted calmly. That honesty hit harder than expected. Eleanor stared at him. "So what now?" she asked quietly. Damien held her gaze for a long moment, then said, "Now you're here." A pause. Then he added even softer, "And I don't intend to lose you again." Eleanor's breath stopped. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Damien didn't answer immediately, just looked at her, and for the first time, his control felt less like dominance and more like something slipping just slightly at the edges. That evening, Elena couldn't breathe properly inside Blackthorn residence anymore. Everything felt louder now. Every hallway felt like it had eyes. Every elevator felt like it was waiting.
and every time she closed her door, she could still hear Damien's voice in her head. "You're here now, and I don't intend to lose you again." She stood in front of her mirror for a long time, trying to steady herself. "This is not normal," Elena whispered, but her reflection didn't look convinced either. Around 9:30 p.m., Elena made a decision, not fully thought out, not calm, but necessary. She was leaving, at least for the night, just to prove she still could. She packed nothing, just her phone and keys. Then she stepped into the hallway. Quiet, too quiet. Even the lights felt dimmer than usual. Elena walked quickly toward the elevator. Her heartbeat was already rising. Halfway there, the elevator chimed, doors opened, Damien stepped out. Elena froze instantly. Of course he was there. Damien looked at her suitcase, then at her face, and immediately understood. "Elena," he said softly. She tightened her grip on her phone. "I'm going out," she said. Damien didn't move. "Where?" Not a question, a check. Elena swallowed. "Outside." A pause. Then Damien said quietly, "You're leaving because of what I said earlier." Elena shook her head quickly. No, it was a lie, and he knew it. Damien stepped closer. "Elena," he said again, softer now, "don't do this." That tone, it wasn't commanding, it wasn't controlling, it was something else, something almost restrained. Elena looked up at him. "You don't get to tell me what to do," she whispered. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm not telling you, I'm asking you." That made her pause, because he didn't ask, not usually. Elena hesitated. "I just need air," she said quietly. Damien studied her for a long moment, then said, "You can get air here." "That's not the same." Silence. The hallway felt too still, too intimate. Then Damien spoke again. "Something is going to happen tonight," he said quietly. Elena frowned immediately. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer, not directly. Instead, "If you leave, I can't control your exposure." Elena stepped back slightly. "Exposure to what?" Damien's eyes flickered, just briefly. Then he said, "People I don't trust." A chill ran through her. "That's not an answer," she said sharply. Damien took a slow breath. For the first time, he looked tense. Not angry, not calm, tense. "Elena," he said softly, "please stay." That word again, please. It did something dangerous to her thoughts. She shook her head. "I can't keep living like this," she whispered. Damien stepped closer again, not invading, just closing distance like gravity pulling. "You're not living like anything dangerous," he said. Elena let out a bitter laugh. "I have cameras in my walls, restricted floors, people watching me, and you knowing everything I do." Damien didn't deny it. Instead, he said quietly, "I make sure you're safe." Elena's voice broke slightly. "Safe from what?" A long silence. Then Damien said, "From being taken." That hit differently. Elena stared at him. "Taken," she repeated. Damien didn't elaborate, just watched her carefully. And that silence felt heavier than any answer. Elena stepped back again. "I'm going," she said firmly. Damien didn't move, but something in his expression changed, just a fraction. Something deeper. "Elena," he said quietly. She stopped, not because she wanted to, but because her body reacted before her mind did. Damien looked at her for a long moment, then said, "If you walk out that door tonight, I won't stop you." Elena blinked. That was unexpected. But then he added, "But I won't be able to reach you fast enough if something goes wrong." Her stomach tightened. "That sounds like manipulation," she whispered. Damien shook his head slightly. "It's truth." Silence. Elena's grip loosened slightly. "You're doing this again, the control thing." Damien stepped closer, now only a few inches away. His voice dropped. "I'm doing the thing where I try not to lose you." That sentence, it landed wrong. Too human, too real. Elena looked up at him. For the first time, He didn't look like a system, or a landlord, or a controller. He looked like someone standing at the edge of something he couldn't fully manage anymore. Her voice softened. "Why does it matter so much?" she asked. Damien held her gaze, a long pause. Then he said, "Because you were the first thing I couldn't replace." Elena's breath caught. The hallway went silent again. Even the building noise seemed distant. Damien's eyes didn't leave hers, and in that moment, Elena realized something terrifying. This wasn't just obsession, it wasn't just control, it was attachment. Deep, old, irreversible. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "What if I still leave?" Damien didn't answer immediately. Then softly, "Then I'll make sure you come back safe." A pause. "And I'll wait." That shouldn't have felt like comfort, but somehow it did.
Late night. Elena didn't leave. She told herself it was because of what Damien said. Something is going to happen tonight. But deep down, she didn't know anymore what was logic and what was instinct. So she stayed, and that unsettled her more than walking out ever would have. Around 1:12 a.m., Elena heard it. A soft knock on her door. Not aggressive, not urgent, just deliberate. She froze. "Elena," Damien's voice came from outside. Her heartbeat jumped instantly. She hesitated, then opened the door slightly. Damien stood there in the dim hallway lighting, still dressed from earlier, no coat now, sleeves rolled, tired eyes, which was new. He didn't look like the controlled version of himself she was used to. He looked strained. "Elena," he repeated softly, "come with me." She frowned. "Why?" Damien glanced down the hallway before answering. "Not here." That alone made her step out. "What's going on?" she asked. He didn't answer, just started walking. Elena followed, against her better judgment. They took the elevator down. Silent ride. Too silent. Elena watched him the entire time. "Damien," she said again, more firmly, "talk to me." His jaw tightened slightly. "Not yet," he said. That wasn't like him. He always had answers. Always. The elevator doors opened. Basement level. Elena froze instantly. "This is restricted," she said. "I know," Damien replied. He stepped out anyway. Elena hesitated, then followed. The corridor was different here. Colder, industrial. No warmth, no designed softness, just concrete and locked doors. Damien walked to a heavy steel door at the end. Elena stopped a few steps behind him. "What is this place?" she asked quietly. Damien didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "Part of the building you were never meant to access." Elena frowned. "That's not comforting." He looked at her briefly. "I didn't say it was." He opened the door. Inside was a small security control room. Monitors lined the walls, live feeds, hallways, elevators, dorm rooms. Elena stepped in slowly. Her stomach dropped. "This is," she whispered. "Everything," Damien finished. She turned to him sharply. "You're watching everyone." "No," Damien said calmly. "The system is." Elena looked at the screens again. Her own hallway appeared. Her door room, her movements from earlier in the day. She felt sick. "You said you don't watch me," she said quietly. Damien stepped beside her. "I don't need to," he replied. "The system does it automatically." Elena turned to him slowly. "That's the same thing." Damien didn't argue. That silence confirmed too much. Elena stepped back. "This is insane," she whispered. Damien watched her carefully, then said quietly, "Now you understand why I said I can't let you leave tonight." Elena's heart dropped slightly. "You're still doing it," she said. "The controlling thing." Damien shook his head. "No," he said softly. "I'm showing you reality." Elena stared at him. "Why show me this at all?" A pause. Then Damien said, "Because someone accessed the restricted floor last night." Silence.
Everything in Elena's body went still. "What?" she whispered. Damien turned slightly toward the monitors. One screen zoomed in, the restricted hallway, the black door, and a flicker of movement near it. Elena felt cold instantly. "That wasn't me," she said quickly. "I know," Damien replied. Her breath caught. "You know?" Damien's gaze stayed on the screen. "Yes." A pause. Then Damien said, "But it means someone else is trying to get to you through my building." Elena's voice came out unsteadily. "Who?" Damien finally looked at her, and for the first time, there was something darker in his expression, something almost angry. "I don't know yet," he said. That was worse. Elena swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" Damien stepped closer, not threatening, protective, intense. "Now," he said quietly, "I make sure you don't leave my sight until I do." Elena shook her head. "That's not sustainable." "It is," Damien replied. She looked at him. "You can't just isolate me because of a maybe threat." Damien held her gaze. "It's not a maybe to me." Silence. Then Elena asked quietly, "Why?" Damien didn't answer immediately. For a long moment he just looked at her. Then finally, his voice dropped lower than before. "Because I already lost you once." Elena froze. "What are you talking about?" Damien's jaw tightened, and for the first time, he looked like he was about to say something he had buried for years. "You don't remember," he said quietly. Elena stepped closer. "Remember what?" Damien looked away for a fraction of a second, then back at her, and said, "After high school, you disappeared for a while." Elena frowned. "I went to college." Damien shook his head slightly. "Not then," he said. "Before that." Silence. Elena felt something shift in her chest. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Damien's voice softened. "You don't remember the incident." Elena's pulse quickened. "What incident?" A pause. Then Damien said, "The night you almost didn't come back home." The words landed like ice. Elena stared at him. "That never happened," she whispered. Damien looked at her carefully. "You think it didn't," he said softly. And for the first time, Elena wasn't sure if the problem was Damien's obsession or her missing memory.
Late night. Elena couldn't sleep. Not after the control room, not after what Damien said. "You think it didn't happen." That line kept echoing in her head like a fracture forming in something she didn't even know was whole. She sat on her bed, staring at her hands, trying to remember anything. A gap. That was the problem. There wasn't just confusion, there was nothing. Like a page torn out of a book she didn't realize she was reading. A soft knock came at her door. Elena tensed instantly. "Elena," Damien's voice came through quietly. "Open the door." She didn't move immediately. "Why are you here?" she asked. A pause. "Because you're not sleeping." That wasn't an answer, but it was true. She walked to the door and opened it. Damien stood there. No suit jacket, just a dark shirt, sleeves rolled, tired eyes again. Different from before, less controlled, more human. "You shouldn't be alone right now," he said softly. Elena frowned. "You've been saying that a lot lately." Damien didn't deny it. Instead, he looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You're remembering something." Her stomach tightened instantly. "I'm not," she said quickly. Damien stepped inside without waiting for permission. Elena stiffened. "That's new," she muttered. He ignored it. "You are," he said quietly. Elena crossed her arms. "You're really committed to this theory that I've lost memories." "It's not a theory." That made her pause. Damien turned slightly towards her desk, then back. "There was an incident in your final year of school." Elena shook her head. "No." Damien didn't react. "You left school early that day. You didn't come home when you were supposed to." Elena's breath slowed slightly. "That doesn't mean anything." Damien stepped closer. "You didn't return calls," he added. "No messages, no contact." Elena's voice lowered. "So?" Damien held her gaze. "So I started looking."
Silence. That hit differently. Elena frowned. You started looking? Yes. Her chest tightened slightly. Why would you do that? A pause. Then Damien said, Because you were missing. Elena stared at him. That doesn't explain obsession, she whispered. Damien's expression tightened slightly. It started before that. Elena frowned again. Before what? He didn't answer immediately. Then, before I understood what you were to me. Silence again, this one heavier. Elena shook her head. You keep saying things like that, like I was some kind of fixation. Damien stepped closer, not invading, but closer. You weren't a fixation, he said quietly. Elena held his gaze. Then what was I? A pause. Then Damien said, You were the only thing I couldn't predict. Elena frowned slightly. That's not normal either. No, he agreed softly. That honesty again. It always disarmed her more than anything else. Damien continued. That night, he said, you were seen leaving campus with someone who wasn't registered. Elena's stomach tightened. I don't remember that, she said quickly. I know, Damien replied. Elena's voice sharpened slightly. Stop saying that like it proves something. It does, he said quietly. A beat. Then he added, You were taken. The words dropped into the room like a weight. Elena went still. Taken? She repeated. Damien nodded once. Elena, he said softly, you were missing for 6 hours. Her breath caught. That's not possible, she whispered. It happened, Damien said. Elena shook her head. No, I would remember that. Damien looked at her carefully. You don't. Silence. Elena stepped back slightly. That's insane, she whispered. Damien didn't argue. Instead, he said, You came back late that night, injured, silent, and after that, you changed. Elena's pulse quickened. I didn't change. Damien's voice softened. You did, he said, and I noticed immediately. Elena's chest tightened. You're saying you followed me because of that? Asked Elena. Damien shook his head slightly. No, he said. I followed because I couldn't stop thinking about what happened to you when no one was looking. Elena's voice dropped. And that turned into this. Damien held her gaze. That turned into understanding I couldn't leave you alone in a world I couldn't see clearly. Silence again. Elena's breathing felt uneven now. You didn't have the right, she said quietly. Damien nodded once. I know. That answer hit harder than anything else. No denial, no defense, just acceptance. Elena stared at him. You're telling me you built all of this, she gestured vaguely, because of something I don't even remember. Damien stepped closer again. This time his voice was softer. Yes. A pause. Then, and because I realized something else after. Elena frowned slightly. What? Damien looked at her for a long moment, then said, I couldn't stop watching you even when you were safe. Silence. That one landed differently. Elena's breath caught. That's not protection, she whispered. No, Damien said quietly. A beat. Then he added, that's where it became obsession. Elena didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe properly. Damien continued, voice low. I should have stopped when you were safe, he said, but I didn't. A pause. I couldn't. Elena's voice came out barely audible. Why? Damien's gaze stayed locked on hers, because for the first time there was no control in his expression, only truth. Because you became the only thing I could not lose. Silence. Long, heavy, final. Elena stepped back slowly. Her mind couldn't process all of it at once. The missing memory, the incident, the surveillance, the obsession, all connected, all centered around her. You don't get to decide that, she whispered. Damien didn't argue. Instead, he said softly, I already did. Elena's eyes snapped to him, and something inside her finally broke through confusion. You didn't protect me, she said quietly. Damien's expression tightened slightly. Elena stepped forward again. You attached yourself to me, she said, and called it protection. Silence. Damien didn't deny it. That silence hurt more than anything else. Elena swallowed hard. I want to know what happened that night, she said firmly. Damien didn't respond immediately. Then, you're not ready.
Elena's voice broke slightly. "I didn't ask if I'm ready." A long pause. Damien looked at her, and for the first time he didn't try to control the outcome, only the truth. "Then tomorrow," he said quietly. And this time, Elena didn't know whether that meant freedom or the end of everything she thought she understood.
The next morning, Elena didn't move from her bed for almost an hour after waking up, not because she was tired, because her mind was still stuck in last night. You were taken. The words didn't feel like imagination anymore. They felt like a locked door she couldn't open, and for the first time, she was afraid of what was behind it. A soft knock came at her door. Elena already knew who it was. She opened it slowly. Damien stood there, same calm presence, but something was different now, less distance, more finality. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. Elena hesitated, then nodded once. "I want the truth," she said. Damien didn't respond immediately. Then, "Come with me." Basement level, again. The elevator ride down felt longer this time. He didn't speak, neither did she. When the doors opened, the cold air hit her immediately. This time, Damien didn't take her to the control room. He walked past it, deeper, to a corridor Elena had never seen illuminated properly before. A single door at the end. Not black this time. Grey. Older, like it didn't belong to the rest of the building. Elena stopped. "What is this place?" she asked quietly. Damien didn't answer right away. Then, "It's an old section of the residence," he said. "That's not an answer," she whispered. He looked at her. "I know." Then he opened the door. Inside was not a room. It was a storage archive. Old student records, incident logs, medical folders. Elena's breath caught instantly. "Why is my name here?" she asked. Damien stepped inside. "Because this is where everything was documented," he said quietly. Elena walked in slowly, fingers shaking slightly as she pulled one file forward. Elena Hart, Incident Report, Year 2. Her heart stopped slightly. "No," she whispered, "this isn't real." Damien didn't stop her. She opened it. Report summary. Student reported missing after leaving campus grounds at approximately 7:42 p.m. Returned at 1:58 a.m. Found near West Boundary Road in distressed condition. Memory gaps reported. No clear statement given. Elena's hands went cold. She dropped the file slightly. "That's not," she started. Her voice broke. "That's not me." Damien spoke softly behind her. "It is." Elena turned sharply. "I would remember this." Damien's voice stayed steady. "You didn't." Silence. Elena stepped back again. "No," she whispered. Damien's nod slightly. "I know." Then he walked further into the archive. Elena followed reluctantly. He stopped in front of another file, didn't open it immediately, just looked at it. "Elena," he said quietly. She didn't respond. Damien finally spoke. "When you came back that night," he said, "you weren't fully okay." Elena's breath hitched. "You were injured, disoriented, silent." Elena's voice came out shakily. "Stop." Damien didn't. "And something in you changed after that. You stopped trusting spaces. You started checking exits constantly. You stopped walking alone." Elena shook her head. "That's not—" "It is," Damien said softly. A pause. Then, "And I noticed first." Silence. Elena's eyes burned slightly now. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" she whispered. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. "They tried." Elena frowned. "Tried?" Damien looked at her. "You refused to talk about it." "Completely." Elena stepped back again. "No," she whispered. Damien's voice lowered. "You blocked it out." That word landed like a crack. Elena shook her head harder. "No," she said again. "No, no, no." Her breathing started to shake. Damien stepped closer slowly. "Elena," he said quietly, But Elena stepped back. "Don't," she whispered. Her hands trembled. "This is not real. This is not—" Her voice broke, and suddenly, a flash. Not memory, a feeling. Dark road, rain, a hand grabbing her wrist, a scream stuck in her throat. Then, nothing. Elena gasped sharply. Her knees almost gave out. Damien caught her instantly. Not forceful, just steady. "Elena," he said softly. She pushed against his chest weakly. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no!" But her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was breaking. Damien didn't let go. He held her carefully, like he already knew this moment would come. "I didn't want you to find it like this," he said quietly. Elena looked up at him, eyes wide, shaking. "Then, why?" she whispered. Damien held her gaze, and for the first time there was no control left in his voice, only truth. "Because I couldn't protect you from what already happened." A pause. Then softer. "But I could protect you from it happening again." Elena's breath hitched. Her voice came out barely audible. "So that's why you did all this?" Damien didn't hesitate. "Yes." Silence. Heavy. Final. Elena stared at Damien, trying to hate him, trying to process it, trying to separate fear from everything else suddenly tangled inside her chest. "You ruined my life," she whispered. Damien nodded once. "I know." Then he added quietly, "And I would do it again if it meant you stayed alive." Elena's grip on his shirt loosened slightly. Her voice trembled. "I don't know what I feel about you." Damien didn't move, didn't push, didn't control, just looked at her and said, "You don't have to know today." Silence. The archive felt too still, too heavy. Elena swallowed hard, then asked softly, "What happens now?" Damien finally looked away for a second, then back at her, and said, "Now you decide whether I'm the person who trapped you," a pause, "or the one who kept you here long enough to remember you never were actually gone." Elena didn't answer, because for the first time, the answer didn't feel simple anymore.
The silence after the archive didn't end when they left it. It followed Elena all the way back upstairs, into the elevator, down the hallway, into her room. Even when Damien left her alone, finally giving her space, it still stayed, like the building itself had changed shape around her thoughts. That night, Elena sat by her window, curtains open, not because she forgot, because she couldn't stand closed spaces anymore, not after the file, not after the fragments, not after the feeling that had slipped through her like a memory trying to return without permission. Her phone buzzed once, and message from an unknown number. Unknown, "You're not safe in Blackthorn." Elena stared at it, her fingers went cold. Another message followed immediately. Unknown, "He didn't save you, he kept you hidden." Her breathing slowed. Then a third message. Unknown, "Come to the West Gate, you'll remember everything." Elena's grip tightened. The West Gate, the same direction from the report. Her stomach twisted. Before she could think, a knock at her door. Not soft this time, firm. Elena stood immediately. She already knew. She opened the door. Damien stood there, and he saw her face instantly. "You saw it," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Elena swallowed. "Yes." A pause. Then she showed him the phone. Damien read it, expression unchanged, but something in his eyes tightened slightly. "Don't go," he said. Elena looked up at him. "You already know I might." Damien didn't deny it. That honesty again, always the hardest part. Elena whispered, "Who is it?" Damien's jaw tightened. "I don't know yet," he said, a beat, then softer, "but I know what they want." Elena frowned. "What?" Damien looked at her fully now. "You," he said, simple, direct, no hiding. Elena's throat tightened. "That report," she said quietly. "You never told me everything was still active, did you?" A pause. Damien didn't answer immediately. That was enough. Elena stepped back slightly. "So I'm still in danger," she whispered. Damien nodded once. "Yes." Silence. Then Elena laughed softly, not because it was funny, because it was too much.
So what am I supposed to do? Damien stepped closer. Stay inside, he said. Elena shook her head immediately. That's not an answer. That's the same thing you always say. Damien's voice dropped slightly. Because it's still true. Elena looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't step back from him. Or maybe, she said quietly, you're just afraid of losing control. That landed, not loudly, but sharply. Damien went still. Elena continued. You built walls around me, she said. You called it protection. You called it safety. You called it everything except what it is. Damien's voice stayed steady. And what is it? Elena held his gaze. Fear, she said. A long silence. Then Damien spoke quietly. Yes. That answer surprised her. He didn't defend it, didn't soften it, just agreed. Then added, but not of you leaving. Elena frowned slightly. Then what? Damien stepped closer again. This time there was no hesitation, only truth. Fear that I would fail you again, he said. The words hit deeper than anything before. Elena's expression shifted slightly. You didn't fail me, she whispered. Damien shook his head once. I found you after, he said. A pause. That's not the same. Silence. Elena's voice dropped. So what do you want now? Damien looked at her for a long moment, not as a landlord, not as someone controlling a system, just as himself. Then he said, I want you to choose. Elena blinked. For once, he added quietly, without me deciding the outcome first. That was new, too new. Elena stared at him. What if I leave? She asked. Damien didn't hesitate. Then I make sure you're not followed, he said. A pause. And I stop controlling your movement. Elena frowned. You just let me go? Damien looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, I would try. That was the most honest thing he had said so far. Silence. The building outside hummed softly, life continuing as if nothing inside this room was breaking apart. Elena stepped closer to the door, then stopped, turned back. Damien, she said quietly. He looked at her immediately, always immediate. Elena's voice softened. If I stay, a pause. What am I staying as? Damien's expression shifted slightly. Not control, not obsession, something more fragile. Then he said, someone I would learn not to lose. Silence. Elena looked at him for a long moment, then slowly stepped back inside. Not away, inside. Damien didn't move, just watched her, waiting, for once, not deciding. Elena exhaled shakily. I'm not forgiving you, she said quietly. Damien nodded once. I know. A pause. Then she added, but I'm not leaving tonight either. That landed between them. Not resolution, not peace, something in between. Damien's shoulders loosened slightly, just a fraction. Elena sat down on her bed, still unsure, still shaken, but not running. Outside, the lights of Blackthorn residence stayed steady, watching, waiting, but for the first time, they didn't feel like a cage. They felt like a question. And inside that question, Elena was finally allowed to decide the answer herself.